Greetings, all. Welcome to Aquarian Diary. I'm your host, John Irving. It is July 15th, 2025. I'm just jumping on here fairly quickly because I want to share a few things that have been sort of coming up for me lately. I also want to say that I have noticed that there have been extreme fluctuations in my energy almost on a day-to-day basis. Some days I have a lot of energy, I get a lot done, and then other days I'm like totally zonked. And a few other people have shared that that is happening to them too. So I wonder if it's happening to you as well. Like I said, pretty extreme fluctuations in our energy. I also am fairly abreast of things that are happening in the world. And I kind of am in a bit of a state of shock often about just how dark it is. And I wonder, how did we get here? I never would have thought that, for example, what's happening in the United States right now, that anything like that would even happen in my lifetime. It never even crossed my mind. And as far as I'm aware in the sort of spiritual psychic community, I'm not aware of anyone who predicted this to the degree that it's actually happening in advance. I don't mean recently, but I mean like a few years ago. I often go back to Dolores Cannon's work, and I have talked about that here before a long time ago, this notion of a timeline split. And it always struck me, she brought that forward a very long time ago. And I have also talked about how polarization is actually increasing. I published an episode on that a long time ago too. And I wonder, how do these energies reconcile? Because it seems to me that the polarization is getting more and more intense, dark to light, really extreme contrast. Now, some people might dispute my interpretation of what is light, but from my perspective, it's really, really clear. Even if you look at what Christ said in the Bible, it's very clear. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And that we are judged on the basis of what's in our heart. And from my perspective, what we are seeing is a tremendous amount of grievance-fueled nihilism, if not sadism. Sadism meaning where people take pleasure in the suffering or pain of others. Clearly that is not an enlightened spiritual expression of desire or will. So again, I always find myself pondering, how do these polarities reconcile? How can you meet in the middle? There is no middle. If at this point you can't differentiate between light and dark, you're dark. Right? If you can't tell the difference between what's right and what's wrong, you're wrong. You're on the wrong side. This is clear. So even those people who are sort of sitting on the fence are making a choice, basically. It is a tacit endorsement of what's happening. We've had this experience before, like, for example, in the 1930s. Books have been written about this. The banality of evil. So that question stands. How do we reconcile this polarity? I can't see how that's possible entirely. Like I said, there is no middle ground, because the middle is endorsing the status quo. And I often wonder if what's happening now is really kind of like a call out to people's hearts. Where is your heart? Where is your state of consciousness? I think what has happened with a lot of the populist figures is that they have kind of given license for people to come out and express their darker tendencies, their inner darkness. They've made it more culturally acceptable. Not to me, and probably not to you, but as far as they're concerned. So we're increasingly seeing reports of people coming out and endorsing a lot of what I consider to be sociopathic or even psychopathic behavior. In other words, maybe people secretly harbored these kinds of feelings, this kind of darkness, but were too afraid or timid to express it before. But now they are. They've been given license to do it publicly. It's kind of like people are coming out from under their rocks. into the daylight, and we can all see it. So I've had this theory for quite a few years now, and I'm not sure I've ever expressed it publicly before. I think I've mentioned it to a couple friends. But it goes like this, that these populist figures are kind of like the Pied Piper. They draw out people who resonate with that, and who, like I said, have these dark energies or dark desires. Like, for example, we now see these billionaires with all their grievances and whining and complaining about how the system isn't fair. And of course, ironically and completely hypocritically, these are the most privileged people that have ever existed in the history of humanity. Like, it couldn't be more absurd. The contrast could not be greater. I could name quite a few of them. There's even more than I think many people think. Ultra wealthy people who live in a complete bubble, who have all these grievances, and yet they are literally billionaires. Like, you couldn't make it up. But back to the Pied Piper theory. These figures that other people gravitate towards and coalesce around are a means of drawing them out. We can all see it now. It's in black and white. Whereas before, a lot of this stuff was swept under the rug, or it was hidden from view, and we all kind of sensed it was there, but it now appears that it was way worse than we even realized. In other words, there's a lot more darkness in humanity than most of us thought. Now, if you're a more compassionate, empathic person, this can be quite shocking and alarming to you. And it is to me. I feel often like I'm in a bit of a state of shock these days. Like, how can this be happening? So how does this all resolve itself? A lot of people in the spiritual community are kind of talking about how there's going to be this upliftment, and I talked about that recently too. But I still can't grasp the mechanics of how that would actually happen. Now, if the timeline split theory actually still holds water, that would be one way in which this shift could transpire. In other words, there's just like two camps. We're not going to reconcile. That's just the way it is. Do we realistically and honestly think that hundreds of millions of people, if not billions of people, are just going to suddenly have huge changes of heart in the span of a few years? Or is it simply a matter of putting them back in the box that they were in before? Like, they're not going to go away. They're just going to be there. I don't know. But the notion of having this contrast become so extreme that it actually splits or separates humanity into two camps, so to speak, would be one way of answering that paradox. I can't explain it scientifically. I don't know how that would actually manifest or take place on Earth or what it would look like. But there is no question that the polarity between darkness and light is at levels that the vast majority of people who are alive have never witnessed before. This is irrefutable. I often read articles and I will look at some of the comments, and I usually will sort them by the most liked so I can see what rises to the top. And I'm often stunned by how malicious people are. And my response is kind of like, where did you come from? You know, the truth is that 99.9% of the people in North America are immigrants or descended from immigrants not too many generations ago. Think of the hypocrisy. It's all about their own self-interest at the expense of others if necessary, and sometimes to shocking degrees. This is not compassion. This is not a heart-centered perspective. This is not a spiritual perspective. And I don't see how we can fix that on a mass scale. This isn't just about money. It's about darkness, and it's about light. So, a bit of a stream of consciousness. What do you think of my Pied Piper theory? That the darkness is being drawn out so that it can be identified and noted. And let's be clear, we all have darkness to varying degrees. It's just that some of us are willing to admit it, confront it, and work on it to improve ourselves. And other people are actually attached to it. They like it. It's part of their identity, whether they admit it publicly or not. And they will actually try and redefine reality, redefine the rules, to validate and legitimize their darkness. I still have a really hard time believing that hundreds of millions, if not billions of people are suddenly going to become enlightened or fundamentally change in fairly short order. What is the mechanism for that? How does it happen? It's just very hard for me to picture that. Let me know what you think in the comments. For more detail, check the episode description for other episodes or articles that are related or that I mentioned. And if you're interested in a reading with me, I'll put a link to that as well. Many sincere thanks to everyone who supports me, especially my YouTube members and astrology clients. Thank you very much. Take care, all the best, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye for now.